Behold, I come quickly. Episode 32, The Two Harvests. Revelation 14 also describes two spiritual harvests, one for the righteous and one for the wicked. Revelation 14 verse 14 deals with the harvest of the righteous first. And I looked, and behold a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. Revelation 14 verse 14. John sees Jesus returning to the earth on a white cloud, just as Matthew 24 verse 30 describes him. It is crucial to understand that Jesus' return to the earth occurs after the wrath of God and not before. Pre-tribulationists and pre-wrath rapture believers teach that the saints will be whisked away before God's wrath is poured out. They fail to realize that God will protect his people from the plagues, even though they will suffer tribulation at the same time. This will be thoroughly explained soon. Jesus has a golden crown, indicating the supreme authority of his kingship which he has to carry out this harvest. The sharp sickle in Jesus' hand is symbolic of him gathering his saints at his return. The fact that the sickle is sharp denotes the thorough, effective ingathering of all believers. Not one saint will be left behind. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle, and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. Revelation 14 verses 15 to 16. God the Father, through the angel coming out of the heavenly temple, tells Jesus to gather his people. Revelation 14 verse 16 is the moment of the harvest of the saints, a symbol of the gathering of the saints on Christ's return described in 1 Thessalonians 4 verses 16 to 17. This will be further discussed in a future episode entitled, The Seventh Trumpet and the First Resurrection. Notice that verse 16 states that Jesus thrusted in his sickle on the earth. This is in reference to the saints who live on earth, but do not belong to this corrupt society. Jesus will gather his people from off the earth, that is, from out of the corrupt society in which they live. Now notice in verses 17 to 18 the harvest of the wicked. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, which had power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. Revelation 14 verses 17 to 18. Another angel comes out of the heavenly temple with a sharp sickle, and another angel having power over fire, representing judgment, comes out from the altar. This altar is the altar of burnt offerings, where sacrifices were slain and burnt with fire, see Leviticus 1. When someone wanted to make a sin offering, the person selected a male animal without spot or blemish, laid his hand on the head of the animal, and confessed his sins over it. Then he would slay the animal and give it to the priest, who would go through the process laid out in Leviticus 1 of making an atonement for sins and burning the animal on the brazen altar. With the sins placed on the animal, the sins were destroyed with the death of the animal. By the innocent animal dying with the sin, God's justice was executed against sin, and the penalty for sin, which is death, is paid in full. It is possible that the angel from the brazen altar in Revelation 14 is the same angel John saw in Revelation 8 performing the worship service in the temple of God in heaven. He was seen taking fire from the brazen altar and filling the golden censer with the fire before casting it into the earth. The fire from the altar symbolizes judgment executed against sin, and in the case of Revelation 14, it is judgment executed against the wicked, who will have to pay the penalty for sin due to their refusal to repent. The angel over fire commands the angel with the sharp sickle to gather the clusters of the grapevine. And the angel thrust in his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. Revelation 14 verses 19 to 20. The angel thrusts in his sickle into the earth. Notice that in verse 19 John wrote, into the earth instead of, on the earth, like he did in verse 16. This is in reference to the wicked, who not only live on earth, but are part of the corrupt system. They are firmly rooted into this society like grapevines. The angel gathers the grapevine of the earth and casts it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. A winepress was a large basin where men would tread grapes. The juice would spill onto the side of the basin into containers. In Revelation 14, the wine oozing out of the grapes represents the wrath of God. In Revelation 15, we see 7 angels holding the 7 golden vials filled up with the wine of the wrath of God. The phrase, the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath, is mentioned in Revelation 16 verse 19 in reference to God pouring out his judgment on the great city Babylon, as if pouring a cup of wine on something, like white clothing. Wine leaves a permanent stain on white fabric, thereby ruining the cloth. Similarly, God's wrath will permanently destroy Babylon. The city mentioned in Revelation 14 verse 20 most likely is the city of Jerusalem. The juice oozing out of the squashed grapes is described as blood, a sign of death. This illustration applies to the battle between the beast and Christ. The grapes themselves represent the wicked being crushed by God's anger. The blood is said to rise to the horse's bridle. Consider how tall a horse is, and the length thereof is 1,600 furlongs, which is 200 miles. This is a graphic symbol of the extremity of God's wrath. The picture is not to be taken literally, as though the amount of blood spilled will equate to the length and depth described in Revelation 14. The symbol simply makes us recognize the great strength of God's wrath. God's wrath will be poured out without mixture, that is, without mercy, and will leave many of the wicked dead. Because of how the harvests are listed in Revelation 14, people assume the righteous will be gathered first and taken to heaven before the wrath of God is poured out. But this chapter simply displays how the harvests are carried out. Remember, Jesus will not come back until after the wrath of God is finished. Meanwhile, the 144,000 will still be on earth when the wrath of God takes place. Unlike the wicked, who will suffer from the 7 veil judgments, the 144,000 will be protected by God from these plagues.